Hello, and welcome to the Folklore and Fiction Podcast. My name is Kelly MacCath-Moran. I'm a PhD candidate in the Folklore Department at Memorial University of Newfoundland, and I'm also a speculative fiction writer under the pseudonym C.S. MacCath. The Folklore and Fiction Podcast and Dispatch synthesize these passions with a focus on folklore scholarship aimed at storytellers. You'll find the Folklore and Fiction archive along with the rest of my work online at folkloreandfiction.com. Interested listeners will find a link to the current dispatch in the show notes, where a more comprehensive record of this episode can be found, including a bibliography and other references. At the summer and winter solstices, I mimic the sun and pause to reflect on my own creative work. In this episode, I'm discussing religious belief in my short story, He Who Steals the Sun Shall Bear Its Gravity, published in the E's for Evil anthology, edited by Rhonda Parrish. An excerpt from He Who Steals the Sun Shall Bear Its Gravity. Cadus could not bring himself to give a damn what the simulant tool of the enemy was thinking or feeling, and he was medicated to give a damn now. "I'm going to pray." He gestured at the altar and then at the picked-over food trays. "Are those real?" "No," she replied in a too bright tone, "but I can bring you something to eat. Any requests?" Cadus went to the altar and floated his fingers over the candle flame. It was hot, and the wax smelled of spice. "Whatever food you can find, black coffee and a bedroll. Anku isn't out of options yet, and I want to be here if Nevenek needs me." His concern was clearly the opening Emian needed. "If he does, is there some way to disable the Sul fleet altogether?" She was hesitant, not out of fear, but in the way an effective manipulator spoke when something of note was at stake. Cadus himself had employed the same technique so often that her efforts sounded hollow and clumsy to his ears. "I only ask because it would save so many lives." "Of course." A sardonic grin slid across his face and disappeared. He leaned down and touched the holy objects in turn, a best-effort invocation from a man who had never prayed before. "So you are self-aware," Cadus remarked in a mocking tone. "How do you feel about being sent here to die with me?" "I didn't know you were a religious man." Emian evaded the question and came to stand beside him at the altar. "I was alive when the Writ of the Elements was a collection of theological verse passed among a handful of heretics. So I'm not religious in the way you might imagine. I just find myself in need of reliable symbols right now." Cadus settled cross-legged onto the prayer cushion provided. "And you didn't answer my question." Emian crossed her arms. "You didn't answer mine, either." "No, I didn't. Now go away and do as I asked." Cadus bowed his head, closed his eyes, and listened while her footsteps receded. Behind him, the Capimont general waited inside the ambitrans like a docked shuttle whose pilot had gone to bed. The empathy drug coursed through his body again, and with it came another tsunami of guilt. He leaned forward to rest his forehead on the varnished edge of the altar and permitted the tide to carry him all the way back. He could almost smell the rain-drenched earth of his childhood home, feel the slippery organs of animals he had defiled as a boy, hear the grieving of his plain, kind brother for one missing pet after another. Tanko's almost pretty wife had been so easily wooed, bedded, and abandoned to bear a son of uncertain paternity to a husband who knew and loved her even so, who had forgiven Cadus just as Emian Cadet claimed to have done. Tanko knew what I was long before my parents did. Spent his whole life begging me to accept a corrective implant, and his forgiveness meant nothing to me. Now it's too late to atone. To him, or Isaro, or even to Togi, who was certainly my nephew, and might have been my son. He sat this way. This episode of the Folklore and Fiction Podcast is a preview, and you can listen to the full episode on the Folklore and Fiction website. Just click on the dispatch link in the show notes or go to folkloreandfiction.com and sign up for a free account. Thanks very much for your interest. Copyright 2019 to 2023. Kelly S. MacCath-Moran. All rights reserved unless Creative Commons licensing is specifically applied.